I always thought if I died, it would be in some big, dramatic, poetic way, maybe saving a puppy from a burning building or pushing a child out of the path of a speeding train. Something that would make the news, have people crying at my funeral, saying, she was too good for this world. But nope. I died tripping on the sidewalk after nearly getting hit by a truck. The truck honked, I panicked, twisted my ankle trying to jump out of the way, and face-planted right into the curb like a bad cartoon character. 1 second I was on my way to my 6th straight day of unpaid overtime in a fluorescent-lit hellscape called Neocom Office Solutions, and the next, everything went black. No tunnel of light. No angel choir. Just darkness and the cold realization that I died wearing a $9 suit with coffee stains on the sleeve. And then, I woke up. At first, I thought I'd landed in some weird purgatory or maybe the afterlife just resembled my college dorm for budget reasons. But then I heard a knock on the door and a voice that hadn't entered my ears in nearly a decade. Yui, you're gonna be late for Professor Inoue's class. My breath caught. That voice. Kana. My roommate. My best friend. The one I ghosted after graduation. I scrambled to my mirror, expecting to see my hollow-eyed, spreadsheet-obsessed, caffeine-fueled face. Instead, I saw college Yui. Fresh-faced, no eye bags, hair still thick and healthy, no neck pain. I screamed. Kana burst in with toast in her mouth like an actual anime character, and dropped it in horror when she saw me spinning around in panic. You good? She asked. You look like you saw a ghost. I think I am the ghost, I muttered. I checked my phone. The date. The year. This couldn't be. I was 19 again. In college. Before the endless nights of overtime, before the heartbreak, before the spiral into corporate despair. I sat on the bed, my legs wobbly. I remembered this day. I was supposed to skip class to finish a presentation for a club I joined just to be near Haruki. Haruki. Oh no. I was back before I ruined everything. Haruki was the guy who smiled at everyone like they were made of sunlight. Who stayed behind to help pick up chairs after club meetings. Who lent me his umbrella and walked home in the rain. And what did I do with that affection? I panicked. I shut him out. Worse, I lashed out. Told him I didn't need pity. Told Kana to stop pushing me. I told everyone to leave me alone. Because I was scared. Because I didn't think I was enough. And when they actually left me alone, I buried myself in work. I majored in things I didn't love. Took internships I hated. Landed a job that devoured my soul, thinking that if I just kept moving, I wouldn't have to feel the ache of what I lost. But now I was here. Back at the fork in the road. And I wasn't going to waste it. I'm going to class, I said suddenly. Kana blinked. You? Really? Yup. And I'm going to join that dumb club again. And I'm going to be nice to Haruki. And I'm going to eat real food and not just instant noodles. Maybe even touch grass. Who are you and what have you done with Yui? I grinned and threw on my hoodie. New semester, new me. Let's go. I didn't know how long I had in this weird rewinded reality. Maybe I'd wake up tomorrow back in my crappy apartment with a broken printer and 3 missed deadlines. Maybe this was a dream. But if it was, I was going to make the most of it. As I walked across campus and felt the breeze in my hair, I almost cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. From hope. Because this time I wasn't going to throw it all away. Not my dreams. Not my friends. Not myself. The first thing I did when I saw Haruki again was say thank you. He blinked like I'd slapped him. For what? He asked. For being kind to me, I said. I didn't appreciate it before. He smiled, confused but warm. Well, you're welcome? And just like that, I felt something crack open in my chest. A future unfolding, different from the one I had lived. A second chance. And I wasn't letting go. The rest of the day felt like walking through a dream I almost forgot I had. The campus buzzed with energy I hadn't felt in years, bikes weaving through sidewalks, club posters plastered on every lamppost, the smell of cafeteria curry and laundry detergent in the air. I watched it all like a tourist in my own past. Everything was so bright. So chaotic. So alive. Kana and I sat through Professor Inoue's lecture while she kept side-eyeing me like I'd been body-snatched. You took notes, she whispered halfway through. You never take notes. Well, maybe this is the semester I turn it around, I whispered back. But the truth was, I remembered everything he was going to say. I aced this class before, at least academically. Emotionally? Not so much. I spent that semester zoning out, daydreaming about a future that had no real shape, all while slowly isolating myself until there was no one left to care. But now I had a shape. A plan. A second chance to get it right. After class, I dragged Kana to the quad and signed us both up for the literature and arts club. She squawked in protest. You ditched that club last time. You made me quit too. Yeah, well, this time we stay. It'll be fun. We can doodle and read bad poetry and make friends. Who are you? She asked again. And what weird self-help book did you read? None, I said with a grin. Just a new perspective. That afternoon, I spotted Haruki near the vending machines outside the student center. He was chatting with a guy I vaguely remembered, Sora, I think, who always wore striped socks and played the guitar badly in the courtyard. I hesitated. My old self would have turned around. Walked the long way just to avoid the awkwardness of being seen. But I squared my shoulders, marched up, and waved. Hi again. Haruki turned, a bit surprised but still smiling. Hey. Yui, right? Yeah. From class. And umbrella. And mild emotional damage from last semester. He laughed, and Sora chuckled too before tactfully disappearing around the corner. Haruki tilted his head. You're different. Is that a bad thing? No, he said, gaze steady. Just, surprising. But in a good way. We ended up walking and talking for nearly an hour. He told me about his dream to become a teacher, how he volunteered at the local kids center on weekends, and how he was terrible at cooking but amazing at laundry. I told him about my sketchbook. How I used to want to be an animator. How I gave it all up because I thought no one cared about art if it didn't make money. I care, he said simply. If it makes you happy, that's reason enough. I almost cried again. This time I held it in. But something shifted. That night, I dug out my old sketchpad from under the bed. It was dusty and full of half-finished ideas, but it was still there. Waiting for me. Like everything else in this timeline. The next few days passed in a warm, surreal blur. I joined study groups. I laughed more. I slept, actually slept, without waking up to deadlines screaming in my skull. I started drawing again, one panel at a time, a silly little comic about a depressed office lady who gets reincarnated and tries not to screw it up. Kana read the first few pages and said it was cute. Haruki said it was brilliant. I told them I hadn't felt this happy in years. And I meant it. But the past still tugged at me sometimes. Like when I caught myself checking my wrist for a smartwatch I no longer wore. Or when I flinched at the sound of an email notification from someone else's phone. Trauma doesn't vanish overnight, even when you get a second life. Still, I was here. I was trying. I was alive. And one morning, Haruki showed up at my dorm door with 2 coffees and a notebook. Let's work on our dreams together, he said. And if we fall down, we'll help each other back up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to climb alone. It didn't take long for the whispers to start again, the kind that had haunted me the first time around, only now I noticed them more sharply. Isn't she the one who used to ignore everyone? Didn't she snap at Haruki last semester? She's acting like a different person. And they were right. I was. But the strange thing was, it didn't hurt this time. Maybe because I understood now. People remembered the version of me that was closed off, cold, hard to approach. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the weight of my own expectations, the fear of being seen and then rejected. They just saw what I showed them. And now, I was showing them something different. I started greeting classmates who used to ignore me. Smiling first. Asking questions instead of waiting to be asked. It wasn't easy. The anxiety didn't magically disappear just because I rewrote my schedule. But little by little, my world widened. Haruki noticed. He didn't push or pry, just offered silent encouragement, coffee on rough mornings, an umbrella on rainy days, his hoodie when I forgot mine. One night, after a long study session, we sat under the cherry blossom tree behind the library, and he leaned back against the trunk with a sigh. You ever think about the future? He asked. I froze, the question hitting too close to home. All the time, I said honestly. But not the way you think. I used to believe I had to follow some perfect path. Good grades. Good job. Stability. Prestige. But it didn't make me happy. It just made me tired. And now? I looked up at the pink petals drifting down around us. Now I think I want a future that feels soft. Not easy, not lazy. Just gentle. Full of people I love and work that doesn't make me hate mornings. He was quiet for a moment, then smiled. That sounds like a nice future. Can I be in it? I choked on my own breath. What? Your future, he repeated. I'd like to be part of it. If that's okay. It wasn't a confession. Not really. But it was close. And my heart, battered and cautious as it was, fluttered like it hadn't in years. I think I'd like that, I said. I didn't know where we stood, exactly. But I knew I was drawn to him, not just because he was kind or cute, but because he made me want to be the version of myself I gave up on. Someone passionate. Someone brave. Someone alive. I started drawing more seriously. Applied for a spot in the Student Artist Showcase. Helped Kana start her little zine project. I even volunteered for the club's cultural festival booth, designing posters and decorations without hiding behind excuses. And when someone asked if I wanted to run for vice president of the club next semester, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. For the first time, I didn't wait for permission to live. I just did. The darkness was still there, somewhere in the corners. That feeling of being not enough, of waiting for everything to fall apart. But it didn't own me anymore. And one afternoon, as Haruki and I walked back from the cafe, hands brushing but not quite holding, I realized I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I was curious. Excited, even. Because this time, I wasn't letting fear steer the wheel. This time, I was choosing joy. And I was choosing it with my whole heart. The real shift came the day I got called out in class, not for anything bad, but because the professor had seen my comic in the student lounge and wanted to use it as an example of narrative storytelling. He said it was raw and charming and full of emotional honesty, and I wanted to melt into my seat and die of secondhand attention. But afterward, several classmates came up to me. One girl said it made her cry. A guy said it helped him feel less alone. Even the club president, a senior who used to intimidate me just by existing, told me I had something special and offered to recommend me to a summer internship. I walked out of that building in a daze, heart pounding. Haruki was waiting under the usual tree, earbuds in, tapping his pencil against his notebook. When he saw me, he grinned and opened his arms dramatically. And here comes the campus celebrity herself. Shut up, I mumbled, cheeks burning. They just used my comic as a pity prop. You mean they used your heartfelt, vulnerable, brilliant comic to help other people understand themselves? Yeah. What a disaster. I threw a leaf at him. He caught it. We laughed. But then his expression softened, and he said, I'm proud of you, Yui. Really? I blinked at him, the words sinking deeper than I expected. No one had said that to me in my past life. Not even once. And now, it felt like the one thing I'd always needed to hear. That night, I stayed up past midnight drawing. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My sketchbook was no longer a prison of expectations, it was my playground. I started working on a new story, this one more ambitious, full of characters who made mistakes and tried again. One of them looked suspiciously like Haruki, but I pretended it was a coincidence. Kana teased me mercilessly. You've got it bad, she said, watching me space out during dinner. You're practically writing his name in your rice. I am not. You are. She leaned closer, smirking. So what are you going to do about it? I sighed. That's the thing. I don't want to ruin what we have. What if I confess and it gets weird? What if you don't and regret it again? She had a point. I went to bed that night thinking about the first time around, how I'd let everything slip through my fingers because I was too scared to feel. This time, I wasn't going to be reckless, but I wasn't going to be silent either. A few days later, Haruki and I ended up walking home after a group project. The sky was pink with sunset, and we took the long way, through the park. I stopped by the fountain, heart pounding. Haruki, I said, voice shaking. I like you. He looked surprised, but only for a second. Then his eyes softened like he'd been waiting for this. Took you long enough, he said. I was starting to think I was imagining all of it. You weren't, I said quickly. I just needed time. To be sure. To not be scared. He stepped closer. Are you still scared? A little. That's okay. I'll wait with you until you're not. And just like that, I felt the world shift again, not backwards this time, but forward. Into something new. Something warm. Something worth all the awkwardness and fear and effort. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But we didn't need to. The way his fingers brushed mine was enough. A promise. A beginning. And this time I wasn't going to run away. Things changed after that. Not in some dramatic, fireworks exploding kind of way, but in all the small, quiet ways that matter most. Haruki and I started spending more time together, not just as friends who sat next to each other in class or shared umbrella space, but as something softer. Closer. He'd bring me my favorite snacks without asking. I'd doodle tiny versions of him in the margins of my notebooks, pretending it was just for practice. He started calling me Miss Illustrator when he was being playful and Yui in a tone that made my heart flutter when he was serious. But I didn't let it distract me. Well, maybe a little. But not enough to throw me off course. I was still working on my art, applying to contests, pushing myself to reach for dreams I once buried so deep I forgot they were mine. And it felt good. Not easy, but good. Like waking up after years of sleepwalking. Kana and I were closer than ever. We made each other breakfast some mornings, stayed up too late watching anime, gossiped about everyone and no one. It was a second chance at the friendship I had ruined, and I cherished every second. But the past has claws, even in new timelines. One rainy afternoon, as I waited outside the art building, a girl approached me. She looked vaguely familiar, one of those acquaintances you nod at in passing but never really talk to. She stared at me with a weird intensity. "You're Yui, right?" I nodded. "Yeah? You're different now." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I just mean, last year, you were so cold. And now everyone loves you. It's kind of fake, isn't it?" The words sliced through the air. I didn't know what to say. Not because she was right, but because a part of me still feared she was. I smiled too much now. Acted too cheerful. Was I faking it? Or was I just trying to grow? Before I could respond, Haruki appeared beside me, calm and solid. "People change," he said, his voice even. "Especially when they work hard to be better." The girl scoffed and walked away. I stood there, staring at the puddles gathering by the curb. Was she right? I asked softly. "Am I just pretending?" Haruki shook his head. "Yui, if you were pretending, you wouldn't be scared of the question. You'd already believe the lie." I looked at him then, really looked, and realized this wasn't just a crush anymore. It wasn't butterflies or stolen glances. It was deeper. Rooted. I took a breath. "Would you come over tonight? I'm working on something I want to show you." He smiled. "I'd love to." That evening, we sat side by side on my bed, our shoulders touching. I showed him my latest comic, the one about the reclusive office worker who dies and wakes up in her past. It was full of clumsy metaphors and overdramatic shading, but it was mine. And when he turned the last page, he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he reached out, gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and said, "It's beautiful. Just like you." I laughed nervously, half sure he was joking. But he wasn't. He leaned in slowly, waiting, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. And when our lips touched, it felt like coming home to a place I didn't know I'd left. This was more than a do-over. It was a resurrection. Of hope. Of love. Of me. After that night, everything felt more vivid, like someone had dialed up the saturation of my life. Even the mundane stuff, waiting in line at the cafeteria, cramming for midterms, cleaning out the clubroom, felt meaningful because Haruki was in it. We didn't announce anything to anyone. There was no need. The way he always found my hand under the table or saved a seat next to him in the library said more than words ever could. But the happiness also scared me. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because a part of me still thought I didn't deserve it. That any second now, I'd wake up in my old gray office cubicle again, drained and alone. So I clung tighter to the moments I had. I poured myself into my comics, finished my applications for the summer art residency program, and even submitted a piece to a national contest, something I never dared to try before. And Kana? She was still my anchor. We planned a mini-zine launch with our club, complete with a little booth and handmade merch. "Look at us," she said one night, surrounded by glitter glue and stacks of printed pages. "Who would have thought we'd be this cool?" "Not past me," I said, grinning. She had terrible taste in everything, including self-worth. We both laughed, but I felt the truth settle warmly in my chest. I was building something again. A life. A future. One small joy at a time. And Haruki. He never pressured me to be perfect. When I had a bad day, he'd sit in silence with me, letting me cry or rant or spiral until the storm passed. He never tried to fix me. He just stayed. That was everything. But then the call came. I'd made it to the finals of the art contest. The showcase would be in Tokyo, an all-expenses-paid trip, a chance to meet publishers and illustrators and artists I'd admired since high school. I was stunned. Thrilled. Terrified. What if I messed it up? What if the old fears came crawling back and paralyzed me like before? Haruki was the first person I told. We were sitting on a bench under the soft golden glow of the street lamp outside the dorms. I couldn't look him in the eye when I said it. I'm scared. He took my hand. You're allowed to be. But you're also allowed to be proud. What if I choke? Then you choke. And you stand back up. And you draw another page. I turned to him then, heart full. Will you come with me? He smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. Try and stop me. The next week was a blur of train tickets, suitcase packing, and last-minute edits. Kana hugged me 3 times before I left. Haruki held my hand the whole ride. And when we arrived at the venue, huge, gleaming, packed with talent, I took a deep breath and walked in like I belonged. Because maybe, just maybe, I finally believed I did. The showcase was everything I feared and everything I hoped. Booths lined the hall like a miniature comic wonderland. Publishers, editors, even influencers with massive followings strolled past with clipboards and cameras. My artwork hung on one of the central panels, sandwiched between 2 stunning, professional-level pieces. For a moment I felt the familiar whisper of doubt creep in. What was I doing here? I was just a girl who used to cry at her desk in a dead-end job, who tripped into reincarnation like a rejected side character. But then Haruki came back from the coffee stand and handed me a hot drink with just the right amount of cream. I saw 3 people stop and read your comic, he said casually. One of them smiled. That's impact. I squeezed the cup and smiled. He was right. This wasn't about winning or being the best. It was about reaching people. Telling a story that mattered. Telling my story. I stood beside my panel all day, answering questions, handing out little postcards I'd printed with my social handle. People said kind things. One girl said she cried reading the part where the main character confessed she gave up on her dreams. Another boy said it helped him understand his sister's depression better. I think I almost cried too. By the end of the day, my feet ached and my brain was fried, but my heart was light. The judges hadn't announced the winners yet, but I already felt like I'd won something much bigger. That night, Haruki and I wandered the quiet Tokyo streets, hand in hand. The city pulsed around us with its neon heartbeat, but it felt like we were in our own little world. We ended up at a 24-hour diner, splitting pancakes and laughing over how exhausted we were. You know, I said, poking at a strawberry, if I could go back and tell my past self that all of this would happen, she'd never believe it. Same, he said. Except I would have believed you'd make it. I looked at him, truly looked, and felt that warm rush in my chest again. Thank you for seeing me. Even when I didn't. He leaned across the table, brushing his thumb gently over my hand. I'll keep seeing you. As long as you let me. My throat tightened, but I nodded. That was the thing about second chances, they didn't erase the scars. But they gave you the choice to grow around them. To bloom anyway. A week later, I got an email. I didn't win first place. But I'd been offered a publishing deal with one of the mid-tier houses. They wanted to serialize my story. My story. I screamed so loudly Kana thought something terrible had happened. Haruki was already at my door before I could even text him, grinning like he'd known all along. We celebrated with convenience store cake and cheap sparkling cider. So, he said between bites, what now? I looked around my little dorm room, paper everywhere, posters on the walls, the scent of marker ink lingering in the air. Now? I said. Now I keep going. And as we curled up together on the floor, surrounded by my dreams made real, I knew this version of my life, this timeline, was the one I wanted to keep. Forever.